Satan in Abrahamic traditions originates as an adversarial role rather than an independent evil being. In early Hebrew texts, the term shaitan means accuser, describing a member of the divine court who tests human loyalty and exposes moral weakness. In the book of Job, Satan challenges Job's integrity with God's permission, functioning as a prosecutor rather than a rebel. During the Second Temple period, Jewish apocalyptic literature reinterprets Satan as the leader of corrupted spirits who influence human sin. Christianity expands this development by merging Satan with the serpent of Eden and the leader of fallen angels described in later tradition. The New Testament presents Satan as a tempter, deceiver, and adversary who opposes the divine plan. His power is depicted as limited but active within human history. In Islam, Shaitan or Iblis becomes a jinn who refuses to bow to Adam, symbolizing arrogance and rebellion. Across these traditions, Satan transitions from a heavenly examiner to a cosmic antagonist, reflecting evolving theological concerns about the origin of evil, human responsibility, and divine justice. Lucifer originates from the Latin term for light bringer, used in the Vulgate translation of Isaiah 14:12 to describe the fall of a Babylonian king metaphorically compared to Venus, the morning star. Over time, Christian interpreters reread this passage as a literal account of a fallen angel. The association grew stronger through early Christian writings that connected this figure with New Testament references to Satan's fall. Lucifer becomes a symbol of pride, ambition, and rebellion against divine order. His story emphasizes that spiritual beings, like humans, possess free will and can misuse it. Medieval theology expanded this narrative into a detailed account of heavenly rebellion led by Lucifer, whose desire to exalt himself above God resulted in expulsion from heaven along with other angels who supported him. Later literature, especially Dante's Inferno and Milton's Paradise Lost, further solidified Lucifer's identity as a tragic, intelligent, and defiant figure. Although the biblical foundation is minimal, the concept of Lucifer as a fallen angel provides a framework for explaining the moral dangers of pride and the conflict between divine authority and self-elevation. In the book of Job, the Satan is not a name but a function within the divine council. This figure serves as an examiner who challenges God's positive assessment of Job's righteousness. His task is to test the authenticity of human loyalty by proposing scenarios that expose potential self-interest. The narrative portrays him approaching God among other heavenly beings, emphasizing his permitted access rather than rebellious autonomy. The Satan questions whether Job worships God for genuine devotion or for the blessings he receives. By stripping Job of wealth, family, and health, the Satan evaluates whether righteousness can persist without reward. The text presents no indication that this figure operates independently of God's will. Rather, he functions under divine limitations and instructions. The role clarifies the distinction between moral testing and malevolent corruption. Later traditions reinterpret this character as an early form of Satan, but the Book of Job depicts a controlled, lawful adversary whose purpose is investigative scrutiny, not cosmic rebellion. The narrative serves to explore human suffering, divine justice, and the complexity of moral integrity under extreme pressure. The serpent in Genesis is a symbolic creature whose role is to introduce moral choice into the narrative. It is described as more crafty than any other wild animal, highlighting intelligence rather than supernatural identity. The serpent questions Eve about God's command, reframing the prohibition in a way that emphasizes human autonomy and the pursuit of knowledge. Its central act is persuasion. It suggests that eating the fruit will lead to expanded understanding rather than death. The serpent's identity evolves later through interpretation. Jewish writings sometimes describe it as a rebellious being, or linked to the Yetzer Hara, the inclination toward desire. Early Christians associated the serpent with Satan, integrating it into a broader narrative of deception and spiritual opposition. This identification influenced theological doctrines about original sin and humanity's moral vulnerability. The serpent symbolizes the tension between obedience and self-directed knowledge, and its presence in the narrative explains the origin of human moral awareness. Its later reinterpretation as a devil figure shows how symbolic elements can acquire expanded meaning within developing religious traditions. Azazel appears in Leviticus 16 as the destination for the goat sent into the wilderness on the Day of Atonement, symbolizing the removal of communal sin. In later Jewish apocalyptic literature, particularly the Book of Enoch, Azazel becomes a fallen angel associated with corruption and forbidden knowledge. He is depicted as teaching humans warfare, cosmetics, and sorcery, skills believed to disrupt natural harmony and divine order. Azazel's actions contribute to the spread of violence and immorality, leading to the judgment of the flood. In Enoch's narrative, Azazel is bound and confined in darkness until final judgment, illustrating a theological model in which evil enters the world through angelic disobedience. The transformation of Azazel from a ritual symbol into a cosmic rebel reflects evolving explanations for human wrongdoing in the Second Temple period. The ritual scapegoat becomes a representation of a being responsible for spiritual contamination. Azazel's character bridges legal rights, mythic storytelling, and ethical reflection, demonstrating how symbolic concepts can shift into personal beings in apocalyptic thought. Mastema is a prominent, adversarial figure in the Book of Jubilees, functioning as the chief of evil spirits generated from the offspring of the Watchers. Unlike the absolute evil associated with later concepts of Satan, Mastema operates with partial divine permission. His role includes testing individuals, accusing humans, and challenging righteousness. He appears in narratives concerning Abraham, Moses, and the Israelites, seeking to obstruct divine plans while remaining subordinate to God's authority. Mastema persuades God to allow a portion of the evil spirits to remain among humanity, arguing that they serve as instruments for testing and punishment. This reasoning frames evil as an element within divine governance, rather than a fully independent force. Mastema's presence clarifies the theological structure of Jubilees, where cosmic order includes controlled opposition to refined moral integrity. His characterization demonstrates how Jewish traditions developed intermediary figures between God and human wrongdoing, shaping later notions of spiritual adversaries. Mastema's function emphasizes testing, discipline, and the complex interplay between divine sovereignty and moral challenge. Samael emerges in Jewish mystical literature as a complex figure associated with accusation, death, and destructive power. In some texts, he serves as the angel of death, executing divine judgment. In others, he appears as the adversary who tempts or obstructs righteousness. The name Samael is often interpreted as poison of God or severity of God, reflecting his dual role as both agent of justice and embodiment of danger. In Kabbalistic writings, Samael becomes linked with the Sitra Ashra, the other side, representing the domain of impurity and imbalance. His relationship with Lilith in some traditions symbolizes the union of chaos and desire. Despite these associations, Samael remains a created being, bound within the framework of divine authority. His actions are instrumental in revealing human character through challenge and temptation. Samael illustrates how evil in Jewish mysticism is not autonomous, but rooted in imbalance within creation. His presence enables exploration of moral struggle, judgment, and the boundaries between holiness and impurity. The figure encapsulates the tension between divine justice and destructive forces. Angra Mainyu, known as Ahriman in Middle Persian, represents the destructive spirit in Zoroastrian dualism. According to the teachings of Zarathustra, reality is shaped by the conflict between two primordial principles: Ahura Mazda, the source of truth and order, and Angra Mainyu, the source of falsehood and chaos. Angra Mainyu embodies deception, violence, disease, and spiritual darkness. Unlike the subordinate adversaries of Abrahamic religions, Angra Mainyu stands as an independent force opposing the good creation. Zoroastrian cosmology describes a timeline in which Angra Mainyu invades the material world, introducing corruption and suffering. Humans participate in this cosmic struggle through ethical choices, aligning themselves with truth, Asha, or falsehood, Diaruji. The conflict will end when Ahura Mazda overcomes Angra Mainyu in the final renovation of the world, restoring perfection. This dualistic model influenced later Western ideas about the devil, emphasizing moral polarization and cosmic conflict. Angra Mainyu's role clarifies the origin of evil as a metaphysical opposition, rather than a corrupted subordinate being. Mara in Buddhism represents the personification of spiritual obstacles that prevent awakening. The name encompasses desire, illusion, fear, and death. In traditional narratives, Mara attempts to disrupt the Buddha's path to enlightenment by tempting him with sensual pleasures, instilling doubt, and presenting threatening visions. Mara's actions symbolize internal psychological struggles rather than external supernatural confrontation. He operates by exploiting attachment and ignorance, which are the roots of suffering in Buddhist thought. Mara's daughters represent various forms of craving, while his armies represent overwhelming emotional turmoil. His role demonstrates that liberation requires confronting and transcending inner impediments. Buddhism portrays Mara not as a creator of evil, but as an embodiment of the forces that maintain the cycle of rebirth. His presence in the narrative illustrates the ongoing challenge of resisting attachment and cultivating mindfulness. Mara remains relevant in Buddhist practice as a metaphor for distraction, temptation, and the subtle mechanisms that impede spiritual progress. His defeat signifies mastery over the mind and the cessation of delusion. Hades in Greek religion is the ruler of the underworld, not a devil figure in the moral sense, but a sovereign over the realm of the dead. The name refers both to the deity and to the domain he governs. Hades does not tempt, deceive, or oppose the gods. Instead, he maintains order in the afterlife. Greek thought lacks a single embodiment of moral evil. Rather, it divides destructive forces among various deities like Eris, the Furies, and certain titans. Hades becomes associated with fear and darkness because his realm contrasts with the living world, not because he embodies malevolence. His role includes overseeing judgment of souls and ensuring the boundaries between life and death remain intact. Over time, Greek and later Roman interpretations merged Hades with ideas of punishment found in Tartarus, leading to confusion between his neutral kingship and punitive functions. Christian reinterpretation further recast Hades as a place of torment rather than a domain of separation. Understanding Hades requires distinguishing between ancient Greek theology and later moralized readings. Set in Egyptian mythology is a god associated with chaos, storms, and foreign lands. He is not inherently evil, but represents disruptive forces that challenge cosmic stability. Set's role varies across historical periods. In early dynastic mythology, he protects the sun god Ra by battling the serpent Apophis during the nightly journey through the underworld. Later narratives emphasize his conflict with Osiris and Horus, framing him as an antagonist who disrupts succession and order. This transition reflects social and political changes in Egypt, including shifts in regional power. Set's association with disorder arises from his unpredictable nature and power over desert environments. As Egyptian thought evolved, Set became linked with foreign invaders, intensifying his negative portrayal. Despite this, he remained part of the divine order, illustrating that chaos has a place within creation. Set demonstrates that ancient concepts of disruptive deities differ from later notions of absolute evil. His mythological functions explore balance, opposition, and the interplay between order and disorder in maintaining cosmic harmony. Pazuzu is a Mesopotamian demon associated with winds, disease, and protection. Depicted with a lion's head, wings, and a scorpion tail, Pazuzu embodies harmful forces, particularly famine-bearing winds. However, he also functions as a protective figure against other malevolent entities, especially the demoness Lamashtu, who threatened mothers and infants. Amulets and statues bearing Pazuzu's image were used to ward off illness and misfortune. His dual role illustrates the Mesopotamian understanding of demons as complex beings who could cause harm or provide protection, depending on invocation. Pazuzu's iconography emphasizes power and ferocity, signaling his ability to confront more dangerous spirits. His presence in ritual contexts demonstrates ancient strategies for managing uncontrollable natural forces through symbolic representation. Pazuzu's reputation in modern culture often exaggerates his malevolence, but historical sources portray him as a liminal figure, controlling destructive winds. His complexity reflects Mesopotamian cosmology, where supernatural beings contributed to both danger and defense within a world governed by competing divine and demonic forces. In Hindu cosmology, Asuras are powerful beings often described as rivals to the devas, or gods. They are not demons in the Western sense, but represent cosmic forces inclined toward ambition, dominance, and attachment. Early Vedic texts depict Asuras as sometimes noble and sometimes adversarial, but later, Puranic literature distinguishes them more sharply as beings whose desires disrupt cosmic harmony. Their conflicts with the devas illustrate the tension between order, dharma, and disorder rooted in excessive ego. Asuras possess intelligence, strength, and devotion, but their motivations often stem from pride and craving. They challenge the devas in pursuit of power and immortality, prompting divine intervention to restore balance. The narrative cycle portrays Asuras as necessary participants in cosmic drama, rather than embodiments of absolute evil. Their existence provides opportunities for moral instruction on desire, discipline, and the consequences of unchecked ambition. The Asura-Deva dichotomy emphasizes that spiritual evolution requires mastery over internal passions rather than external combat with an adversary. The Antichrist in Christian thought represents a future deceiver who opposes Christ and leads humanity astray through false signs, charismatic authority, or ideological control. The concept emerges from the New Testament, particularly the epistles of John, where Antichrist refers to anyone denying the incarnation. Later writings, including Revelation and 2 Thessalonians, develop the idea of a singular eschatological figure who embodies deception and moral corruption. The Antichrist is depicted as using political or religious authority to challenge divine truth. Medieval interpretations merged various texts into a unified narrative involving a counterfeit Messiah, global influence, and final rebellion. The figure symbolizes the dangers of spiritual deception and the fragility of human discernment. Throughout history, the Antichrist label has been applied to rulers, movements, and ideologies perceived as threatening Christian doctrine. Understanding the Antichrist requires separating scriptural terminology from later theological expansions. The concept explains how moral and spiritual corruption can manifest through persuasive leadership and societal movements that distort foundational beliefs. Iblis in Islamic tradition is a jinn who refuses God's command to bow to Adam, demonstrating pride and disobedience. His refusal stems from asserting superiority, claiming that fire is greater than clay. As punishment, he is cast out, but granted reprieve until the day of judgment. Iblis vows to mislead humanity through temptation, whispering doubts and encouraging sinful choices. Unlike some Christian interpretations of the devil, Iblis remains a creature under God's authority and cannot compel humans to sin. His influence depends on exploiting human weaknesses, such as desire, anger, and forgetfulness. The Quran portrays Iblis as an archetype of arrogance, illustrating the consequences of defying divine command. His strategy involves beautifying wrongdoing, creating distraction, and undermining spiritual awareness. Islamic theology emphasizes personal responsibility. Humans cannot blame Iblis for their actions. His role highlights the inner struggle between guidance and temptation. Iblis represents both a literal adversary and a symbolic reminder of the dangers of pride, self-deception, and ethical complacency. In Gnostic cosmology, the demiurge is a lower creator god, responsible for forming the material world. Often named Yaldabaoth, this being is depicted as ignorant or arrogant, mistakenly believing himself to be the supreme deity. The demiurge arises from an imbalance in the divine realm, typically through the unilateral action of Sophia, whose desire to know the unknowable produces a deficient offspring. The demiurge creates the cosmos as a flawed reflection of higher reality and establishes archons to govern it. Human souls contain divine sparks trapped within material bodies, and salvation involves awakening through revealed knowledge. The Gnostic demiurge explains the presence of suffering and imperfection by attributing creation to a limited being rather than the transcendent highest God. This model contrasts sharply with orthodox monotheism, where creation is inherently good. The demiurge concept highlights the divide between spirit and matter, and interprets salvation as liberation from ignorance. It frames cosmic struggle as a conflict between authentic divinity and the false authority of a misguided creator. The medieval European devil synthesizes biblical imagery, folklore, and artistic representation into a singular adversarial figure characterized by horns, hooves, and monstrous form. This visual identity emerges from merging Christian concepts of Satan with older pagan symbols, associated with nature spirits, fertility deities, and wilderness forces. Over time, the devil becomes a central figure in moral instruction, embodying temptation, deception, and eternal punishment. Medieval theology emphasizes the devil's efforts to corrupt humanity through subtle influence, pacts, and false miracles. Artistic depictions reinforce fear and provide tangible imagery for abstract evil. The devil's role expands during the witch hunt era, where he is believed to empower sorcery and form contracts with practitioners. This interpretation reflects social anxieties about heresy, disease, and disorder. The medieval devil represents an evolution from textual adversary to culturally integrated symbol of moral danger. His presence in literature, sermons, and visual art illustrates how religious ideas adapt to social concerns and how imagery shapes doctrinal understanding. The modern psychological interpretation of the devil reframes evil as an internal phenomenon rather than an external being. Drawing from analytical psychology, particularly the work of Carl Jung, the shadow represents suppressed desires, instincts, and fears that influence behavior when unacknowledged. This concept interprets the devil as a projection of the unintegrated psyche. The temptation archetype describes the internal conflict between long-term values and immediate gratification. Modern literature and psychology use devil imagery to explore moral choice, self-sabotage, addiction, and ethical failure. This perspective emphasizes personal responsibility and self-awareness rather than supernatural influence. Temptation becomes a process of rationalization, emotional impulse, or cognitive distortion. The psychological devil provides a framework for understanding destructive patterns and confronting them through introspection. It shifts focus from cosmic struggle to internal development, explaining evil as the result of unresolved conflict within the self. By interpreting the devil metaphorically, modern thought connects ancient symbols with contemporary issues of identity, morality, and mental health.